Ave Maria, and welcome to Divine Poetry, a series that explores the chronological parallels between the history of the Catholic Church and the Old Testament. If you're new to this concept, go back and watch my interview with Kevin Davis. The link is in the video description below. To make things more simple, I have divided up church history and the Old Testament into 8 color-coded time periods. Below you can see a scrolling bar with the names, dates, and the Old Testament books for each period. Use this timeline to guide you in each video. The color frame of each video will match the time period that we're discussing. Now, let's start today's episode. Hello, I'm Dominic, and welcome to episode 36 of Divine Poetry. Today I have another prophecy from the book of Daniel that I take from my book, Vatican II and Antichrist. So in this book, Vatican II and Antichrist, which you can find on our website, I'll put the link below, I try to make the case that the reign of Vatican II and the antipopes, in particular one antipope in particular, constitutes the actual reign of Antichrist that we've all been dreading and waiting for. So today, though, I want to talk about a prophecy from the book of Daniel, specifically the little horn prophecy. And as we'll see in the footnotes in the book of Daniel, they identify the little horn as the Antichrist. But I don't see a fulfillment of this little horn in the context of Vatican II. I actually see it almost a century earlier in the context of the spoliation of the Papal States. And so I'll get into explaining that in a minute. With all these prophecies, I've come to understand they're fulfilled multiple times in many different places, in many different ways. It is divine poetry. So I'm not claiming that this fulfillment that I'm about to show you is the ultimate fulfillment of the Antichrist, but it definitely is a Antichrist with a small a, as I'll get into in a minute. So to start off with, let me first read the prophecy. It comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 7. And I'm not going to read to you the whole chapter. I'm going to kind of select a couple key passages. I encourage you to read the whole thing in context. You'll see why I'm only selecting key passages, because there's some parts that talk about God's justice and the reestablishment of God's kingdom. Just for brevity's sake, I'm not going to include those. But all right, let me start here. This is, I believe, this is going to be Daniel chapter 7, verse 7 and following. Okay, so for some context, Daniel sees 4 beasts, and one's a leopard, one's a bear, one is a lion, and the other one is kind of a grotesque beast that doesn't have a shape that we can identify, but it has 10 horns, and it's the most vicious and destructive of all the beasts. So I'm going to read the portion that we're talking about, this 4th beast. After this I beheld in the vision of the night, and lo, a 4th beast, terrible and wonderful, and exceeding strong. It had great iron teeth, eating and breaking in pieces, and treading down the rest with its feet. And it was unlike to the other beasts which I had seen before it, and had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, another little horn sprung up out of the midst of them, and 3 of the first horns were plucked up at the presence thereof, and behold, eyes like the eyes of a man were in this horn, and mouth speaking great things. I have 2 footnotes that I'll read here from the Douay Rheims Bible. 10 horns. That is 10 kingdoms. See Apocalypse 17, verse 12. Among which the empire of the 4th beast shall be parceled, or 10 kings of the number of the successors of Alexander, as figures of such as shall be about the time of Antichrist. Okay. And then verse 8 footnotes, the little horn, or another little horn. This is commonly understood of Antichrist. It may also be applied to that great persecutor Antiochus Epiphanes as a figure of Antichrist. And as a side note, in the book Vatican II and Antichrist, I build upon the parallels between church history and the Old Testament as a foundation to interpret prophecy. And we see in those parallels, we see that Antiochus Epiphanes and what he did in the books of the Maccabees parallels Vatican II chronologically. You have a new second altar in the time of Antiochus. You have all the ornaments being stripped out of the temple. You have the outline of the old traditional Jewish sacrifices and religious practices. And you have the mandating of the new pagan Greek practices, specifically the abomination of desolation, which would be parallel to our Novus Ordo. There's many more parallels there. I have videos on it, and you can also get the book Divine Poetry to read all about it. So let me continue. I beheld, and lo, a horn made war against the saints, and prevailed over them, till the Ancient of Days came and gave judgment to the saints of the Most High. And the time came, and the saints obtained the kingdom. And thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be greater than all the kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns of the same kingdom shall be 10 kings, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be mightier than the former. And he shall bring down 3 kings. This is a key part of the prophecy. This little horn shall grow mightier than all the other ones, and he'll bring down 3 kings. And he shall speak words against the high one, and shall crush the saints of the Most High. And he shall think himself able to change times and laws, and they shall be delivered into his hand until a time, times, and a half time. And this is why this is a prophecy of Antichrist. One of the reasons why is that he shall crush the saints universally, and he shall think to be able to change times, laws, and seasons. And we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so going to the commentaries on this passage, I came across St. Jerome. I'm going to read you what St. Jerome had to say about this. So just to give you an introduction to it, St. Jerome lived before the fall of the Western Roman Empire. I think he was alive in the 380s AD, after Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, but before the Western Roman Empire fell. So from St. Jerome's point of view, the Roman Empire had been there for almost 1,000+ years at that point, or the civilization of Rome had been there for 1,000+ years, and it was the system of order that gave order to his whole world. The Roman Empire spread throughout all of the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Middle East, all throughout the southern countries of the Mediterranean, like Spain and southern France, for sure all of Italy, parts of Croatia and Dalmatia, but also spread all the way up into Gaul, into modern-day Germany. So it was the most pervasive, long-lasting, and comprehensive empire, but it ruled and kept order. It had roads and aqueducts and a system of laws and government, and there was civilization there. There was reading and writing and on and on. So, massive amounts of inventions and engineering feats. So it was a civilizing force that kept out the pagan darkness of the barbarians, that kept law and order and on and on. All right. So let me read what St. Jerome had to say here. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. He states that at the end of the world, when the Roman Empire is to be destroyed, and then I'm going to paraphrase, this is from my book, I'll put the picture on the screen. By the 10 horns they shall parcel out the territory of the ancient Roman Empire amongst themselves. And then concerning the little horn, he states this: then an insignificant 11th king shall arise, who will overcome the 3 of the kings. And then after he does that, this little horn will establish his rule over the whole empire. Now, so this prophecy seems to be centered upon Rome and the Roman Empire and the civilization that Rome founded, which is a very common theme amongst many church fathers who interpret this passage. I only quoted one. The Roman Empire, as we know, fell in 476. The Eastern Roman Empire did not fall, and it kept on going, and it got renamed the Byzantine Empire. Historians named it that, but it was Roman. Then, in 800, Pope Leo XIII crowned Charlemagne, and he started the Holy Roman Empire. And so the idea of Rome continued through the papacy and through the church, and got reseeded the Roman Empire, so to speak, with the barbarians. The Holy Roman Empire existed until the 1800s, when Napoleon, he deposed the very last Holy Roman Emperor, Francis II. But there was one piece of land left that was a remnant of the old structure of Europe, the structure that existed all throughout the Middle Ages, the structure of Christendom. And that one piece of land, that remnant piece of land that still existed, maintaining the order of the old way of the Holy Roman Empire, was the Papal States. The Papal States were given to the Pope in 756 by Charlemagne's father Pepin, and the Church retained the Papal States until 1870, which is the center of this prophecy, which I'm going to get into. So, kind of in an abstract way, we can see that the Papal States, which were centered in Rome, right? Rome was the seat of the papacy, and also was the center of the Papal States. It was the center of government of the Papal States. The Pope ruled over the Papal States as a temporal king. It was all that was left in 1870. It was all that was left of the ancient order of Christendom, and one could even argue all that was left of the reinvented Roman Empire. So what happened in 1870? Well, let's get into that here. Okay, make sure I'm not missing any notes first. Right. Okay. So after the French Revolution, there was a trend amongst the leaders of Europe to create nation states. And so we have the secularization of Europe happening. Napoleon secularizes Europe on a massive scale. And then the ideas that he inculcated into the population, they seeded a new way of thinking of things, a new way of understanding things. And they wanted to have secular nation states governed by non-religious laws. So you have France becomes a republic, nation state. Germany founds itself, I think, after the Franco-Prussian War at some point, and on and on. So, but Italy was a latecomer to this fad of nation states, because the Papal States sat square in the middle of the Italian Peninsula, and it made it impossible to unify the government under a secular leader. And you also had, on top of that, many other kingdoms. In the mid-1800s, I've counted 10 or 11. Now, they are kind of hard to count because they come in and out of existence, some of the smaller ones. But let me just read you the 10 that I identified, the major ones, and I might have missed one or two, but I really looked hard. I don't think I did. There were 10 or 11 separate Italian principalities or kingdoms in the mid-1800s. You have San Marino, you have Savoy, Sardinia, Lombardy, Venice, the Papal States, Parma, Medina, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which is a very large one in the south. It encompassed all of southern Italy and the island of Sicily, Monaco, and Tuscany. And so, in the mid-1800s, the Freemasonic forces in Italy, the Carbonari, I believe they were called, avowed enemies of the church. The papacy had written multiple encyclicals condemning Freemasonry, exposing Freemasonry, so they were diametrically opposed to the church. So they wanted to take the Papal States by force, and they wanted to unite all of Italy under a new secular king to have a nation state. This is called the Italian Risorgimento. Risorgimento is the Italian word which I think means resurgence. The little king of Savoy, which is a region of Italy, or present-day Italy, in the northwestern part of the peninsula. It's actually up inland a little bit, just on the Italian side of the Alps. His name was Victor Emmanuel II, and he was a Freemason. And so he went about with the help of his brutal general, Garibaldi. They went about conquering kingdoms. So the first one they conquered, and let me get this right here. I have a map on the screen, you'll see. Okay. One of the first ones they conquered was the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. And that was a major victory for these Freemasons in their effort to unite Italy under one secular king. And so they did that, I believe, is 1859. And then they went to the Papal States and took part of the Papal States in 1859. And then they also went 2 years later to the Kingdom of, Two Sicilies fell in 1861. And then the Kingdom of Lombardy fell in 1859. So after these three kingdoms fell, all of the other kingdoms of Italy agreed to unite under Victor Emmanuel II. And so remember, there's three of them, okay? And then in 1870, they came along and they finished off the Papal States and took the remaining portion of the Papal States, interrupting the First Vatican Council in the process. So remember, the prophecy from the book of Daniel talks about these 10 kings and 10 horns, and this little horn's going to come up and he's going to displace three of them. And then he's going to think to be able to change times, laws, and seasons. Well, the Papal States in particular, but all of Italy, was ruled still, even in the 1800s, by Catholic laws for the most part. The Freemasons were chipping away at that. But when the Freemasons came in, they set up a whole new system of secular laws from Rome itself, specifically in Rome, but also, emanating outwards to the rest of the Italian Peninsula, in which they changed the laws to be secular. So they allowed Protestant churches to come in. They allowed the Jews to build synagogues. They changed, they made divorce legal, and all the immorality that they were promoting, they legalized and they codified it into law. So they changed times, laws, and seasons, which is what the prophecy also says. It says, "He shall think himself able to speak against the High One." Well, of course, that's God in the ultimate context, but it's the papacy as well. The papacy was the high one in the church, the high one in terms of authority on earth. That's God's authority on earth. And they put out cartoons lambasting the papacy, trying to ridicule the papacy, trying to change public opinion against the papacy, speaking against the high one. So clearly, amazingly, this prophecy seems fulfilled in the context of Risorgimento. And keep in mind also, St. Jerome says this is going to be centered around the Roman Empire, which is what I was speaking about earlier in this video. that in this Risorgimento, they took the last remaining bastion and portion of the ancient Roman system, and they made a new secular Italy out of it. Okay, now, to keep on going with this theme, well, I should mention real quickly also that when this happened in 1870, Pope Pius IX, he receded into the Vatican, the confines of the Vatican, refusing to come out of protest. And then the future popes, they all continued this practice of protest. They never left. They were called prisoners in the Vatican. Now, they were self-exiled, of course. It was a way of kind of saying they were not happy with what happened. Technically speaking, the Freemasons claimed the very land under the Pope's feet as well. All of it, all of the Vatican. Vatican City did not yet exist yet. They didn't have their own separate little city-state yet. But the Freemasons claimed all of it. But the popes were not physically removed because that would have been just too obnoxious. I don't think the Italians could have stomached dragging the Pope out, so they didn't. But so Pope St. Pius X, he lived during this time, and he wrote this. He wrote an encyclical called Essa Primi in 1903. And he said, he was talking about the world in general, suffering from a terrible and deep-rooted malady, which developing every day and eating into the inmost being is dragging it into destruction. Then he said this, this is the beginning of those evils, which are reserved for the last days, and that there may be already in the world the son of perdition, the Antichrist. So clearly, the popes during these times were seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak, and they saw this cornering of the papacy and the taking of all their temporal lands. They saw this as the beginning of the reigns of Antichrist, which is exactly what this prophecy from Daniel is about. And then furthermore, before Pope St. Pius X, there was Pope Leo XIII, and he wrote the St. Michael prayer. The extended version says this. Now he's talking about these Freemasons specifically and how they confiscated the church's land, and they took actual churches as well outside of the Vatican compounds, and they remade them for their own purposes. Be favorable to thy church, he's praying to God in the St. Michael prayer, the bride of the Lamb without spot, whose enemies have filled to overflowing with gall and inebriated with wormwood. They have laid profane hands upon her most sacred treasures, where the see of the most blessed Peter and the chair of truth has been constituted as a light to the nations. There they have placed a throne of their abomination and impiety, so that with the pasture struck they may prevail to disperse the flock. And it's that reference to the Freemasons putting up in the very place of the chair of St. Peter their throne of abomination and impiety. That's language of Antichrist. That's what that is. So the popes of this time clearly saw the reference. But of course, again, we know that the church didn't, the persecution didn't continue, because in 1929, Mussolini signed the Lateran Treaty with the Holy See, giving the Holy See present-day Vatican City, and thus kind of it was a pressure release for the Vatican. The job wasn't finished by the Freemasons. In fact, they were given a little enclave of relief and of respite in having Vatican City. But nonetheless, though, that's a profound fulfillment of the prophecies from the book of Daniel, chapter 7. Again, just to kind of review real quickly, there's going to be 10 kings in the Roman Empire of some kind, in some way, and a very small, insignificant king is going to rise up and conquer or lay low 3 of the other kings, and then he's going to become the great one. And it's exactly what we saw with Victor Emmanuel. He was one of the smaller kings on the Italian Peninsula, and he managed to conquer all of them. He did so by conquering 3 specifically, and all the rest fell into line afterwards. So amazing. You can find that in my book, Vatican II and Antichrist, along with a whole other, a bunch of other interpretations from the book of Daniel about Antichrist and about the end times that are all fulfilled in the context of Vatican II. I do have an idea also about how that prophecy might be run again in the context of Vatican II as well, but it's not nearly as solid or as discernible as this one, so I really haven't presented it in public yet. I might see if I can work on it a little bit. I've been doing it for years and nothing's ever popped out, so I'm satisfied with not knowing the answer to that. But nonetheless, there you go. Okay, so keeping my eye on politics and on the synod, on synodality, and hopefully in the coming weeks I'll be able to present more parallels between the year of 4 emperors and the year of 4 presidents. Everyone have a great week. Ave Maria, and and glory be to God.